Gentlemen, what was your most embarrassing half-mast story? I was 13, being checked out for growth problems by a female doctor. She had me lay on the table while in a hospital gown. She was oldish, salt and pepper hair, large glasses. She started by listening to my breathing and examining my top half. As I felt her working her way down, I got the most awkward instant tower and apologized. She assured me it was totally normal for my age and that I shouldn't be embarrassed. She waited a few minutes for things to calm down. She went under the gown to examine the size of my stones. She lightly touched my bag and I finished on her hand. She also said it's normal and I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I straight up just wanted to die. From that point on, I tickled my pickle before any more appointments. In grade 7, there was a guy who was supposed to do his presentation before me. He was sitting beside me in class and then noticed that he was standing at attention, wearing basketball shorts too. I offered to go first to give him a moment to sort himself out. The teacher made a big deal about having to follow the order list on the board, so the guy got up, trying very unsuccessfully to hide it. The teacher's face dropped when he realized what was going on, but it was too late. The poor guy got through his presentation, but the jokes followed him around for years. The camera passed me in class while I had a random standing stone in high school. Guess who was on the school news intro rocking a stiff peak every morning for months? I was on the swim team in middle school. The team was co-ed and during practice I was standing above my crush on the diving block while she was in the pool. We were chatting a bit. She had just finished her laps and was about to dive in. I guess her swimsuit had gotten tight as she swam, so she went to pull out the top of her suit in order to loosen it. From my perspective above her, I essentially got a quick glance of her entire chest. At 13 years old, this would have been great, except she certainly noticed that I noticed. I wanted to believe that I was coy, but I really doubt it. To make matters worse, I was wearing a tight bathing suit myself. We probably just stared at each other for the longest 5 seconds of my life before I heard the coach call for me to dive into the pool and finish my laps. Needless to say, I had a bit of extra drag for my first 100-meter freestyle. The worst part was I was definitely supposed to switch to the backstroke after the first 50 yards. But my crush was still in the lane and I kind of made an executive decision not to flip over directly in front of her. I was embarrassed enough with a rudder, I definitely didn't need a sail. Generous metaphor. I feel like you could have played the Jaws music if you had decided to do the backstroke, but I can understand you not wanting to give your school that opportunity for lifelong mockery. When I was a freshman in high school, I had an Adidas windbreaker and had a raised monument. Unfortunately, my name was called next to go up in front of the class for my presentation. So real quickly, I tried the old tuck the boy up under your boxer's pants waistline seam so it's not making a tent trick. While I was giving the presentation, I used a hand movement to show something up high, which lifted my shirt up enough to where my member's tip was showing like a turtle head sticking out of a shell. The collective gasp and laughs of the room was all I needed to know that most of the class just saw my manhood. I had a friend in high school that got one and was called to the front of the class. He was wild and just announced that he was pitching a tent and couldn't stand up. Everyone laughed with him instead of at him. I had a huge crush on this chick beside me in high school my freshman year. Out of nowhere, I popped one, and wouldn't you know it, my teacher said, "Okay, I just finished grading your test and I'm going to call you up one by one to see your test scores." And I'll be darned, I was the second. Thankfully, I was in the first row, but I still had a rock-hard eggplant. So as I got up, I acted like there was something on my shoe I was trying to get off, and I made it to her desk. I then leaned on her desk and said, okay, and then as I walked back, I acted like there was still something on my shoe and sat down. "Hey guys, let's walk like gorillas." Happened on my first official date. We were about to get up from our table at the restaurant and old Johnny decides to come on out of nowhere. Told her I had to reply to an important work email even though I was 15 and she knew I didn't have a job, nor was I in the process of applying to one. I just started dating this girl. We were super compatible in so many different ways. When the time finally came to do the deed, I couldn't get an ounce of blood to flow to my little buddy. Bless her heart, she tried and I pushed rope a couple of times, but never got remotely close to being solid. She was probably the most attractive woman I've ever been with, and I think my brain was too focused on performing, and the nerves got the best of me. We ended up giving up and talking about everything, laying in bed together. She started talking about one of her friends who had taken action to not be alive anymore when she was younger. And out of nowhere, Mr. Johnson decides to suddenly become both an unstoppable force and an immovable object. I attribute it to me starting to feel comfortable around her and still being really in the mood. I waited until she finished her story, said a few words and then pulled her on top and let her ride to completion. This day she still jokes about having to whisper sweet suicidal nothings in my ear to get me in the mood. Walked into the kitchen and Dad was in there. I had a solid one, he saw it and told me to go back upstairs. I was 13. My grandma had recently passed away and my entire family had to go to the funeral. My pants were really tight and you could see like everything. So during the service, this good-looking woman sat right in front of me. So when I started to feel the movement of my little sir, I got scared. Then out of nowhere, the fricking funeral conductor asks everyone to stand up. But since I had a raging extra leg, I decided to stick my bum to the seat. Now my grandma in heaven knows that I care about my member more than her. It was my sophomore year in high school. Me and a classmate, a girl, were going to do a presentation on plants for our biology class. The teacher gave us a couple of minutes to reflect on what we were going to do. He let us move around the class and sit across from each other on a table. Me and her were sitting across and she puts her legs on top of mine. She was short, kind of imagine someone putting their feet on a table while sitting. This was during the first days of May, so it was warm and everyone had summer clothing. We were both wearing shorts and she had sandals on too, so I was feeling her bare skin. I didn't necessarily have a crush on her, but I thought she was kind of hot. As she starts moving her feet around, my legs, like playing but not intentionally trying to be seductive, it happens. Thank God she didn't feel it because it was there and her feet were dangerously close to my downstairs area. The teacher called us to present, but I asked for another 3 minutes, saying we weren't ready, for obvious reasons. I did get rid of it before I presented. I wanted to tell her, but I feel like she might think it's creepy, which it probably is. Had to do the old waistband tuck right before walking out on stage for the first time as a 12-year-old in the middle of a school production of Anne of Green Gables. I know a guy who, while on tour, woke up in the van with a mid-afternoon stalagmite when they stopped at a gas station. He did the old waistband tuck to go in and grab a snack and drink. Turns out he misjudged some geometry and also his shirt didn't quite reach his waistband, so he had some helmet poking out. Following a groin injury, got an ultrasound on my junk from a cute nurse. Resistance was futile. Similar thing happened to me. Hot female technician did an ultrasound on my family jewels. Humorous now only because it turned out I didn't have cancer down there. Warm gel, attractive female. Yeah, no way to avoid it. Marine Corps Recruit Department, San Diego, in the recruit separation platoon, being sent home for medical reasons. I was 19 at the time and was sleeping in my rack, surrounded by about 40 other guys, all asleep except the fire watch. We all woke up to the usual screaming of the DI and I had a nice case of morning rigidity. First time it happened while I was there. I sat up and proceeded to immediately splooge in my shorts. These were thin, cheap fabric shorts, reminiscent of 70s basketball shorts. While everyone else hit the line, I had to quickly change and my rackmate stated the reason I wasn't online was, "Sir, Recruit Smithson was too excited to hear your voice and needed to change, sir." Oh God, well I'm sure that your colleagues were nice and understanding about the fact that these things happen and didn't make your life a living misery for the remainder of your time oh, who am I kidding, they definitely did. I just went through the MCRD San Diego, can confirm that random morning stuff loves to show up at the worst times. Had a dude in my platoon get a rager during hygiene inspection one night. It was the hardest time of my life trying to keep my bearing, while the entire time the DI is screaming, "Put it away right now! Get it out of my sight! If light wasn't coming up so soon, I'd have you transform into Jack Black on the quarterdeck." I knew exactly what my drill instructor was talking about, so I proceeded to lose all of my crap. Not everyone understood what he meant. I was in a job interview with my current boss and 3 other people. I was doing a board test, where I work as a teacher, and a board test is when you teach a class based on random topics the interviewers give you, so they evaluate your teaching skills. During it, I got the most random full mast ever. My boss realized, and all I said was, "That was a hard one. I meant the test, that's what I was trying to say," and she couldn't keep a straight face after that. "He became your current boss? Looks like you really stood out from the other applicants." Pizza delivery. You know how awkward it is to walk up to a house holding pizza and an upright soldier? It's bad. Made it worse when the girl asked if it came with the food. This morning I was having breakfast at the Midtown Diner. The bagel was delicious and the coleslaw couldn't be finer. I got a weird look from the waitress as I asked her for the check. I looked down and realized I was inexplicably standing to attention down there. While I've had my fair share of embarrassing raised flags, the worst debacle I've ever seen happened to a kid from my school on the bus. Basically, he and his friend were standing on a cramped bus and then the bus jolted and the kid's reinforced tower slammed hard into his friend's behind, and right at that moment, the stabber let out an accidental suggestive moan. The pandemonium that followed was majestic. The friend shouted that this guy had a hard one and all the kids from my school began to chant the word for it. He had the most mortified expression on his face. It was funny as frick though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. High school junior. I took swimming class as my gym class for that year. Without objectifying too hard, all the girls in the class were really good looking and I was a teenage male. I was particularly fond of this one girl that we will call Alexis. Teacher decides to separate us into 3-person teams and have races, where the teacher decides to call out the stroke she wants you to use as you jump in the water off the diving block. And wouldn't you know it, I got teamed with Alexis. She went first, and as we were lined up, as much as I want to say I was a gentleman, I was just fixated on her butt. Right before she dove in, she turned and said, "Try to keep up," and tossed me a wink, and that's all it took. Bathing suit rager inbound. That wasn't going away anytime soon. It was my turn on the block next. As I dove in, I heard the teacher yell, "Backstroke!" I hit the water and thought that there was no way I was swimming on my back looking like a submarine with the periscope up. I swam freestyle and figured I would play it off like I didn't hear the teacher. The entire lap I only thought about my burning lungs and Sally Jessie Raphael, the unattractive morning talk show host, to get it to go away. Even faking a leg cramp to delay getting out of the pool. Bullet dodged, but my gosh, that was a close call. You aren't on a fricking stealth mission with that one, my dude. I was in high school sitting on the bus and I had a chick that I had a crush on. She was standing, so I cracked a joke like, "Your legs seem tired. I've got a seat for you." Told her she could sit on my lap and she took the offer. Somewhere between her contemplation and her sitting, my soldier took to salute her company and, well, she introduced herself to the soldier. I had this happen when I was a cocky as frick freshman. A girl that was either a junior or a senior was complaining that she wanted to sit close to her friend, who was across the aisle, and I go, "You can sit on my lap if you want," as a joke. I would have moved if she'd asked me to move because I was a wimp. Instead, she sat on my lap, and I got real solid real quick, and she could definitely feel it. And she just sat there and chatted with her friend for the 45-minute bus ride while I turned beet red and died. So I was about 13 and somehow had an ex-girlfriend. We'd dated for 3 months, but back then it was a big deal. Anyway, we were in history together and I overheard her talking to one of her friends. She literally said, "Literally all you have to do is touch him and he'll get a rager." Hearing this, for some reason, brought me to full attention. The bell rang a minute later. So this isn't a story about me, but I am a 9th grade teacher. I teach a public speaking class and one day we were playing a game. It was a game where we were telling a story, then someone had to come along and add to the story. I called time at 1 minute, and they would have to switch with another storyteller. I noticed this boy kept pulling down his shirt and realized, holy crap, he was totally hiding one. I called time at 40 seconds. I hope no one else in the class noticed. It must be hard being a 9th grade boy. That is a lot more considerate than some teachers, and I sincerely hope that your efforts saved that young sir some serious mockery. Hats off to you. I was in algebra in high school with my crush. I remember her wearing a nice blue shirt that day before 3 things happened to me. 1, I wasn't paying attention. 2, I wasn't particularly good at math. And 3, I had a random half-mast going on, maybe caused by said crush. I got called up to the board to solve a problem. The thing wouldn't have been an issue had I continued to sit down, but the sudden motion and shifting of my whole body caused my second brain to go from 50% to 100% in the time it took me to get up to the board. So here I am facing the wall with a raging monster that I know my teacher can see, holding a marker and staring at a math problem I didn't know how to solve. Bless my teacher's heart for walking behind me and talking me through the problem until Junior calmed down and I could go back to my desk defeated and embarrassed. Not me, thankfully, and I'm not even sure if the kid was embarrassed or if he just had world-class poker face, but here we go. I was in computer class in high school and one week we had to do presentations in front of the class. The teacher did have a podium up front near his desk, but it was back and off to the side a little bit, so no one really used it. The teacher called one student up at a time, they did their speeches and then sat back down. Everything was fine until he got to Carl. Carl was one of those kids that was never really outright dirty, but he was always a bit greasy, with clothes that were left unwashed for a day or two too long. He also had a fondness for wearing his clothes from gym class for the rest of the day. When the teacher called on him, Carl stood right up from his desk and began marching to the front, with a tree trunk jutting proudly from his groin, in sweatpants, without even trying to hide it. The teacher saw it early and stopped him on the way up. "Hey, do you want to actually wait for a minute? I'll get another student to give their presentation." Carl just looked at him like, why would I need to do that, and answered with a nonchalant, "No," and continued his trek to the front of the classroom. After digging yourself a hole like that, most people would just cut their losses and make a beeline for the podium to give their speech and wait for things to settle down. Not Carl. Carl strode confidently to the front of the class and started giving his speech. Most of the class was either trying not to laugh, laughing, looking away, or a mixture of all three. Carl didn't care. He gave his speech in full view of everyone without missing a beat, all while sporting the kind of supremely obvious pitch a tent stick that only sweatpants can bring you, and fully ignoring it was even happening. When Carl finished his presentation, he took a little time to organize his notes in front, then walked back to his seat like nothing had happened. He was still rock hard and he still didn't care. Almost every Sunday in church from ages 12 to 18. Ugh, thin slacks and a bored mind free to wander. I was swimming in a pool with some friends, one of whom I had a crush on. I usually have a GoPro with me to document possible shenanigans. All of them decided it would be fun to get the GoPro from me, so naturally I hid it in the pocket of my swim trunks. Now, I've had a rager for the entire time this was happening, so putting it in my pocket wasn't the best idea. My crush found out where the camera was and reached into my pocket. She did not grab the camera. I pulled myself away and hoped she couldn't tell the difference between a hard member and a GoPro. Back in high school, I was sitting around talking with some friends after lunch. It was a big group of us, boys and girls. We were all just talking, BSing about whatever, and suddenly I look over and my buddy is looking at me, laughing and whispering to the girl next to him. Then she looks at me and starts laughing. I have no idea what's going on. Other people start looking across because of their commotion, and eventually everyone sitting across from me in the circle were looking at me laughing. I'm stumped. I know it's me somehow, but I don't know what they're looking at. I start checking that my hair wasn't sticking up or that I'd spilled some food on my shirt. I'm starting to panic a little bit more, and more of the group is laughing at me. It's like one of those dreams where you're in class, undressed, and everyone laughs except it isn't a dream, and I can't figure it out. Finally, I look down. Like, what the frick is going on here, and I can see it. Back then, really loose jeans were the style one wore, and mine were oversized and really loose on me. So while I didn't have a full mast, a huge fold of fabric right on the fly area was sitting up well on its own, and as far as anyone could tell, I was just sitting there talking to all my friends with a monster. Naturally, I reacted with the measured confidence of your average 15-year-old kid and panicked. I started imploring that it wasn't really what they thought it was, making them all laugh harder in disbelief. So in a fit of desperation, I decided to demonstrate as much by slapping down the fly of my jeans to flatten out the fabric to make my case. Naturally, with only a loose bit of fabric between my full-speed hand and my deflated junk, I make contact with my soft sir at full speed and proceed to give myself the mother of all package checks, which of course makes it look like I just smacked the ever-loving crap out of my raging mini-me, having the exact opposite effect that I'd intended. So now I'm falling out of my chair in near tears, 70% pain, 20% embarrassment, and 10% laughing at myself. And all of my friends are just laughing even harder, now that I've seemingly confirmed their suspicions. So there. Yep, I think most men my age have had the experience of desperately and guiltily trying to demonstrate that a fold of loose pants fabric is indeed just that. Never helps the situation. Oh well. 8th grade English, my friend John sat next to me and had a really cute girl sit next to him on the other side. We had one of those very thick textbooks, like 1,200 pages or something. One afternoon, while the teacher was talking and writing on the board, John leans over and taps me on the shoulder. Hey, watch this. He had that particular smile that told me I was going to regret whatever happened next. He closes his textbook, slides the text onto his lap, checks the teacher one more time, and leans over to tap Steph on the shoulder. Hey Steph, check this out. Push-ups. Steph looks over and utters an, "Oh my god." She then leans over for a closer look and goes, "How are you doing that? Is that with your legs?" At this point, John's face turns positively evil, and he utters those words we all wish we could say. "That's not my leg." Needless to say, Steph turned bright red, as did I. John cracked up out loud, drawing the teacher's attention, and the rest of the class was spent explaining what happened every time the teacher turned his back. Well, it was 6th grade and I had a hot teacher, Mrs. K. It was the middle of the year and it was a boring day. Me being 12, I saw that she had on pantyhose and a miniskirt, so I began to daydream. I was completely solid, and then she began another assignment. Problem was that she asked someone to pass it out, and that someone was me. So I got up and walked around like a duck with my hands in my pockets, and walked super slowly and passed them out with one hand. Every guy knew why. I was a junior in high school and was in my personal finance class, and I was wearing just sweatpants with no boxers because they got too sweaty during gym, so I was rocking it commando. We were giving presentations on something along the lines of how we were going to be financially independent, and we had all of our papers in a stack, and whatever paper she pulled out had to present. When the teacher called my name, I was still at full mast, so I just waistbanded it. About halfway through my presentation, my Johnson relaxes enough to fall out of my waistband and is just angled up down my pant leg in full view of 30 classmates. This one girl takes a picture of it and sent it in a group that I was in with the cool juniors, who weren't narcs, when we were planning parties. Apparently some people thought I had a huge member due to the way the fabric fell down my leg, so it looked like I had an extra 2 inches. So it all worked out in the end. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.